Pleased to be joined by author Seth Wickersham on a bonus edition of the CHGO Bears podcast. Adam Hogan, Mark Carman here. We spent a lot of time digesting and talking about what came out in the ESPN.com story, Seth, with which details, it sounds like some, but maybe not all the details that are in the book coming out soon. It's called American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. Before we get into some of these specifics, and thanks so much for taking some time, Seth, to join us to talk about this big Bears story. Just tell us about the book, the process, how much of this story is actually part of it, and why it's coming out now.
It's a small part of Caleb's story, actually. I mean, I first met with Caleb before his last season at USC, and the point of the book is it's a very unique. Quarterback is a very unique American job. It has very unique responsibilities. It's different than, any other job in pro sports where you have to draw upon all these different skill sets from, being a master motivator to a huge a-hole at times to, the spokesman for a company. And I wanted the best look at possible about how it came to be this treasured job in our society and what it means to do it at all these different levels, from high school, college, preparing for the draft, rookie year, NFL, great NFL quarterback, what it's like to be a retired Hall of Famer, what it's like to be married to a quarterback, all of these things. And so, Caleb's one of the characters in it. And, most of the story is about, why he took on this job and what it built in him and stripped away. And, the culmination of it was obviously like the NFL and, the fact that he and his family had reservations about how successful he could be at the Bears.
How close would you say it came to him not being a Bear, Seth?
I would say that they had the gasoline out, but not the matches.
Yeah. I had worked on a story earlier, like this is going back to the Super Bowl, which it sounds like, which would have been before, a lot of this stuff that's in your book even happened, like some of these quotes that we've been reading about. And it was basically like, yep, Carl's there. He cares a lot. They're going to certainly do their due diligence on all this. But at the end, like I talked to coaches that really at the end they doubted that Caleb would actually go all the way down that road and be like, no, like we're not.
It's hard.
Is that kind of fair? Based on what I read from what came out today, that seems to be what actually played out, that like, yeah, they were tempted, but at the end of the day, Caleb was like, no, let's try to make this work with the Bears.
Absolutely. And it was after a visit, that he made to Hallis Hall where he was like, I can do it there. I want to be a Bear. Before then, though, like I said, his dad told me Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die. And he had spent the better part of a year, even longer, meeting with lawyers, agents, people like Marvin Demoff, who helped engineer Elway's trade, Archie Manning, who helped engineer Eli's trade. Was there a loophole around the draft? Like, was there a way for him to have some agency over where his son played? And, we all joke about the quarterback dad, the unhinged quarterback dad, but the fact is Carl Williams was right about just about everything, and his fears about the Bears were dead on. And he wanted to help his son find a place that he could have the best chance of success. I think that when Caleb went to the combine, he met with the Bears. It was okay. He met with Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings, and they really clicked. And Kevin O'Connell, I talked to him for the book, and, one of the things, he played quarterback at San Diego State. He played in the NFL for a little bit. He has been around some of the best quarterbacks and best offensive minds in his NFL career. And I think that he spoke quarterback in a way that Caleb wasn't quite feeling from the Bears staff at the time. So I think his wonder was like, can I do it with Waldron? I'm not quite sure.
What's your understanding of how much Ryan Poles tried to befriend, get to know, make Carl Williams comfortable with his son coming to Chicago?
Well, I think he was, I saw them talk at times, especially at Caleb's pro day, but I think that this is a business, and Carl understood that and Ryan understood that. And, Ryan told Caleb, we're drafting you no matter what. Remember, it's been reported that they didn't even look at Jaden Daniels. This was their guy. And it reminds me a lot of Ernie Accorsi for the Baltimore Colts in 1983, where he says, my job is to pick the best player, and that's what I'm doing. And if the owner wants to go out and trade him after that, that's his prerogative. But my job as GM is to pick the best player. And I think that Poles did a lot to try to get Caleb comfortable and energized about the organization. And ultimately he did. And, but I don't think that lasted too long, once the season started.
Do you think he said that part of it, you could hear that quote in a couple of ways? We're drafting you no matter what. Quit messing around. Or, hey, man, we're drafting you no matter what. There's no one else we're looking at. We love you. Like, do you have any idea how that was spoken to Caleb?
I don't, but it was very clear. Let me just put it that way. It's probably interpreted all the above.
Yeah. So it's
look, the team had all the leverage. And, that's what it left the Williams camp. The only chance they had really was to try to make the situation untenable. And, that wasn't something that Caleb wanted to do.
Yeah. And that's kind of Carl's point, right? With the system and his objections to the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't leave them with a lot of leverage. It's interesting you bring up the pro day. I was there too that day in Los Angeles. And honestly, when I read this morning, my mind immediately went back to that day because and we played this video on our show that we did earlier today of Brian Poles sort of like awkwardly standing by Carl Williams near the stands, and
it was at the railing, and Ryan was down on the field, and Eberflus was there, and Carl was up, on the first level of the stands.
Yeah, and we showed. I took a video of it. We showed it,
and I'm behind him. Yeah,
yeah. So you're in there. They shook hands. It was like kind of a brief interaction, and then later we learned like that's the first time they met, and that always like stood out to me as at least that's how it was presented. But I guess in the end the Bears kind of played their cards the right way because Carl didn't come to Hallis Hall. Caleb had that visit, and they did enough to win him over, or at least avoid what could have been a very public, scene leading into the draft.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears, didn't have to get Carl comfortable. I think that they, want to be professional and everything. But, this is a business, and they had their guy. Now, once the season started, I mean, look what happened. All of those fears, came true.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you kind of a tough question here because you can't see the future. That's not really your job or the point of this book necessarily, but based on all the knowledge that you had going into last season, what you saw play out, which proved a lot of what Carl and Caleb were worried about.
Yeah.
The Bears went out and got Ben Johnson. They've made a lot of moves here, which with the adding in the knowledge that you're presenting here in this book, it makes a lot of sense. Ben Johnson, Kevin O'Connell. Like, do you think the Bears have done enough to reduce some of these concerns that obviously Caleb and his family had?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think the interesting thing is that everyone's fates are really tied to each other. Caleb's fate is now tied to Ben Johnson's. Ben Johnson's and Ryan Poles is tied to Ben Johnson's, and Ryan Poles is also tied to Caleb Williams. So they're all in the same boat at this point. And I did ask Caleb, I saw him, I think it was early February after Ben Johnson had been hired. And, remember at the draft, there was that great moment, and it was a genuine moment where he screamed when he rounded the corner and exited the stage and had that crowd cheering him.
Yeah.
And, he mentioned that he had screamed, when Johnson was hired, and I was like, how do you compare the screams? And, I think the elation of it was very similar, and I think he's really excited. He wanted to be coached hard. I don't think he was coached hard last year. And, I think that for rookie quarterbacks, I don't know how you guys look at it. I just look at it like you survive your first year. Like that's what you have to get through. And, he did survive his first year. There's things he could have done better. There's a lot of things that the team could have done better around him. And we'll see going forward. I do know that, just talking anecdotally to other coaches around the league the past couple of years before Ben Johnson was hired, there's a lot of smart coaches who admire Ben Johnson and outright steal from him.
Seth, is it your understanding, your most logical guess that Caleb is happy to be in Chicago with Ben Johnson right now? Like, what sense do you get?
I think so. I think so. I mean, this is what he wanted. And so it's up to him to, to do the most he can with it. And it's up to the coaching staff to do the most that they can with him.
It wasn't lost on me, at least in what's come out today. So I don't know if it's in the book, and you don't have to give it away if it is, but the Vikings were the team we're talking about, not the Commanders, who had the number 2 pick, who were in the hometown of Caleb Williams, who had hired Cliff Kingsbury. Was that just not an option?
I mean, I don't think Poles was going to trade that pick unless it was a huge. I mean, look, if someone had come in with a monumental package, like maybe the Rams did when they traded up to draft Jared Goff, or the Eagles traded up to draft Carson Wentz, but like they weren't going to trade him to a divisional rival, but they really got along well, and they still do. I mean, you've seen Caleb kind of talk about it, his admiration for Coach O'Connell in his press conferences.
Yeah, I mean, I think people also think that Washington preferred Jaden to Caleb, and to what you were talking about earlier, the Bears didn't even consider Jaden, which to me is like the most curious part of the whole thing. Like, how were they so certain? But I don't know if you have any understanding of that, but they were. That's what he loved.
They were. Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that they wanted, and time will tell. I mean, I think that the hard thing with quarterbacks is that, like, as celebrated and mysterious as it is, this position, the success of it comes down to luck so much more than anybody really wants to admit, and where you go. And you look at Bo Nix going to Sean Payton, who can speak quarterback and call an offense and stay at the cutting edge of what the league is trying to do offensively. And, Caleb didn't have that this past year, and now he's got that.
So that is, and this leads to my last question. We appreciate your time, because I know your phone's been blowing up since this story came out. But so essentially that is the huge question, right? So the Bears obviously didn't have the right spot for him last year. Have they now created it going forward for at least the last 3 years of his rookie deal? But my question to you on that aspect is, if he's feeling great about all this going forward and, it's full steam ahead, how do you've gotten to know the family clearly with this book and him. How do you think he handles this? Because, I mean, I'm sure you can already tell this is a massive story in Chicago. The Bears, there's always something going on with the Bears as we live it on a daily basis. Just how do you think he handles just sort of the bombshell,
the questions?
Yeah, everything that's coming with this.
You're asking me to give him an answer. You could say, hey, look, what we're trying to do in this building right now has nothing to do with selling books. How about that?
There you go. Yeah. All right, fair enough. Well, here it is, the book, American Kings, a biography of the quarterback, Seth Wickersham, who's done an amazing job with everything he's written over the years and with ESPN. This is been a fascinating morning reading. I can't wait to read the book, honestly, Seth. I cannot wait to read it. We'd love to check it out and have you back on when it comes out in September.
See you guys then.
Yeah, Seth, we went deep on a schedule show today that we planned out, and then you saved us because that show was terrible, and your show was phenomenal. So thank you.
I'm happy to help any way I can, guys.
We appreciate it. Thanks, Seth.